Aloha and welcome to the video. So in this video I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. So for a long time I've wanted to make throwing daggers with marlin bills and swordfish bills. The swordfish bills didn't end up working out. The ones that I have are just a little bit too brittle, and so I'll probably be making something out of them later, but for this video I'm going to be pretty much sticking to just the marlin bills. I did also want to test a marlin bill just by itself. So in the very beginning, you saw me throwing marlin bills at a little target I have up on the wall, and that works just fine. But I wanted to see how that would work against against ballistics gel, which is a little bit more realistic of a target. I think it might be too light, just the bill, but maybe not. It's hard to tell. The first step here is I need to prep some of these bills. Some of the bills are fairly solid, some of them are a little bit hollow. So I went ahead and drilled out some of the ones that needed to be hollowed out some more. I filled them with epoxy, and while that epoxy is setting, I can go ahead and start fitting these first set of bills to the koa wood handles. I'm using a couple different methods to affix them to the handle. The majority of them are going to use a standard tongue and groove joint, which is one of my favorite joints for affixing swordfish bills to koa wood handles. This other one I did kind of an L joint. I don't really have a reason why, I just thought it would look cool. The other thing too that I was interested in is I wanted to try a variety of different sizes and lengths, weights, just to see which ones would potentially throw the best or the cleanest. But before I get to that though, I just need to get all of these affixed, get them all set. The fitting is going to be pretty tight, and then I use a combination of epoxy and koa wood shavings, usually from the piece that I took it from, but in this case I just have a bunch of shavings left over, or sawdust I guess would be better. And then I go ahead and glue the joints into place. Normally I would also do a cross peg. I'm not going to be doing a cross peg on any of these. I kind of decided I was just going to lash them, just because I think that'd be a little bit more realistic, that you'd have some type of natural pitch, and then you would use some type of lashing to hold everything together. Not that I'm necessarily going for 100% authenticity, but I wanted to try it without a cross peg. Then again, cross pegs were also used for a lot of different things as well. For this one here, I'm doing it actually very unique. I don't know if I've done this style of joint before for a Pahoa or dagger. What I'm doing is I'm hollowing out the center of this koa, and then I'm going to be insetting the bill directly into it. The only downside to that is it means I won't have a smooth finish from the bill to the koa, which is normally what I'll have, because it'll have a join. Because the koa is actually acting as the structural hold for the bill, I can only kind of round off the edge, and then it goes to the bill itself. If I try to make it smooth, it's just gonna fall out. But the process for these is all the same, and so once I get these first couple set, I can work on the next couple. I'll have to wait a day for the epoxy to fill on those other bills, but it's all the same process, just the joining is a little bit different from each piece to each piece. I have them all shaped and I'm now sanding down. So I shaped them with a 50 grit sanding disc on my angle grinder. And now I'm going to be sanding all of them down to 320 grit. I don't normally sand Pahoa down to 320. Usually it'll sand just to 220, the daggers. Just because there's not a lot of material that's going to be displayed. Oftentimes I'll even put feathers, which I'm not going to be putting feathers on these. Part of the reason why I'm sanding them all so smooth is so that they throw easier. The purpose for these Pahoa is going to be throwing, which I don't normally do. Oftentimes a Pahoa or a dagger in Hawaii is going to be a close range rope and probably not going to throw it. I guess you could, but likely you're not going to. And so I'm just going to be sanding all of these down to 320 grit and getting them ready to oil. As much as you'd probably love to watch me sand all of these down to 320 grit, it's a pretty boring process. So we're going to go ahead and skip most of that and get straight to the oiling. I like to use tung oil as my primary oil. Usually I'll put a layer or a coat, let it sit overnight, or 24 hours rather, for it to cure, and then as needs I'll do additional coats as well. I was very excited to oil all of these pieces. They are absolutely gorgeous. There's a lot of different grains of koa wood. Some of them have a heavier curl, some of them are a darker curl, some of them are a lighter koa, probably edge wood, but each one was unique and just beautiful in its own regard. This one was really gorgeous. The grain looks like, or curl rather, is going lengthwise rather than horizontal, or rather perpendicular, and so it looked really cool. It just kind of looked like the wood itself was not flat, even though I had put in pretty flat angles on that one piece. This one is made of a composite of koa wood and epoxy that I'd made a long time ago, just a cutoff. And then this is the final koa dagger that's just, or not koa, but the Marlin built dagger, just a dagger. So here's each of the pieces oiled, and then the last step here is going to be lashing them. So I'm going to go through the lashing on this first one here. I haven't done this in a long time, so if you're interested, this is how I do most of this. I'll put a notch on the bill. The purpose for this is the bill tapers, and so as you try to wrap, if you don't have anything for that lashing or that cordage to lock into, it'll just slide down the bill. It makes it really difficult to get a nice tight wrap. And then I'm using my just painter's tape to tape one end, a pigtail, onto the bill, and then I make a simple loop and I tape that down so it doesn't move. And then the other end is what I'm going to be wrapping around the bill and locking it into place by wrapping it over itself a couple times, and then every 4 or 5 wraps I lock it into place using a simple knot. And so then I just follow that process all the way until I've lashed it down as far as I want to. Once I've lashed it completely down, or at least as far as I'm going to be taking it, I'll cut off the excess on one end, and then I'll pull the loop through. But before I do that, the pigtail, I'll put a knot in the pigtail. Usually I'll do a double knot or like a square knot. That'll give the pigtail something to, or the loop something to lock on. So as I pull it down, it'll lock into that. So I'm going to remove the tape on this side. And you don't have to use pliers. I use pliers and twist them up just because it's a little bit easier to hold on to. Just anything that you can use to grab hold of that cordage. And then I'm going to pull that loop through. It's going to lock onto the pigtail end where I put a knot. And that'll just kind of seize the entire thing into place. And then I cut the ends and I tuck them in under the lash. And so it makes a very clean, nice looking lash that holds very well. And it does a very good job. And so that's pretty much how I do all of these. I was very excited to test these. So the setup that I have is I have these bags of, I think they're wood chips. I'm not entirely sure. I bought them years ago, actually. I just keep them in my shed so they stay nice and dry. And I have my ballistics gel that's molded off their torso and front. And then I put that rested on top of it. And behind that is just for structure is my cart. And it actually worked really well for what I was wanting to use it for. And then I just tested each Pahoa, each dagger. What's funny is the ones that I thought would throw really well didn't throw nearly as well as I'd expected. The smaller ones were a little bit harder to gauge. You'll see in a little bit about how far I was throwing them from, roughly 10 feet, so not very far. But I'm also not an expert at throwing daggers. This one, I wasn't sure how this was going to work, and sure enough, it didn't quite work very well. It had a very thick Marlin bill. I didn't bring it down to a fine point, and so I was concerned about that. So I had to throw it really hard in order to get it to land. It does have some weight, so once I got a good angle, it did stab in pretty well, but it was not as easy to throw. This one actually worked beautifully well. It's so large that it was difficult to pace a good distance. That kind of surprised me. It stabbed right through my strap. But yeah, so I think that would work really well if you got really good at its distancing. This one felt really good in the hands. A little bit shorter though, so the distancing was harder. This one ended up being the best of all of them. It had the best weight. It felt the best in the hands. It went the deepest into the ballistics gel. You can see about how far away I'm throwing. Not very far. I'm doing about a half turn for each throw. That's how that's working. But it was a ton of fun. They actually worked beautifully. It was awesome. They worked pretty much exactly as I expected. The last one I tested with this one, and it just didn't work at all. I don't know. I thought it was going to work better. It just was too light. It didn't have nearly enough mass. I ended up needing to throw it just almost as hard as I could just to get it to barely stick. And it was really difficult to aim throwing it that strong. And since I had this whole setup, I went ahead and tested with my ihe, my short spear. Just had some fun with that. Mahalo nui for everyone that follows along. I greatly appreciate it. This was a ton of fun. If you liked it, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next video. Aloha.